By way of introduction, my name is Dr. Sharon Nicholson Harrell, and for the past 25 years, I've been the dental director, and I currently am the dental director for First Health Dental Care, where we take care of underserved kids birth to 21. And I want to give a special thanks to all of you in here because the Foundation of First Health supported us when we first opened, and ever since then, you've supported us so that we could continue to provide care for underserved kids in our community. So I say thank you, my staff says thank you, and our patients say thank you. I also serve in the role of Chief Diversity Officer here at First Health, where our goal is to promote and foster an inclusive environment for both our patients and our staff. And I'd like to welcome each of you to the second session of the Thought Leader Series. And Kathy and I were on the same page with this. When people think of diversity, most of the time they think of race, ethnicity, and gender, and all of those are critical parts of diversity, but there are also many other dimensions of diversity, such as age, and that's what Dr. Sotil will speak with us about today. I want to give credit to Amy Tamez, the Director of Principal Gifts, because she came up with the name Thought Leader Series. She's part of our Inclusion Council, which is made up of 23 persons throughout First Health from different backgrounds, different departments, different hospitals who work with me to help create and promote an inclusive environment here. And she said something at that first meeting, it was in June of 2021, and she said that I think First Health should be the thought leader in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we partnered with Kathy Stockham, and here we are today, so thank you. And the purpose of the Thought Leader Series is to serve as an educational forum to learn about diverse topics, diverse cultures, and to explore diverse ideas. Now who you've all been waiting for, it is my pleasure to present the world-renowned, I call him the world-renowned, Dr. Wayne Sotil. So he will enlighten us on the dimension of diversity called age. So welcome to Dr. Wayne Sotil.
Dr. Harrell is one of my heroes. She truly is the most gracious and gentle expander of mental maps. And no one could be more perfect to be leading our appreciation of diversity issues. Because we don't like to think in ways that are new. Our pain centers fire when we think in ways that are new. We like to have our biases confirmed. That's why we love to guide. Neuroimaging studies have shown we love it if we get together and gossip with someone about someone else that both of us don't like. Our pleasure centers fire. It's almost autoerotic. PET scan studies show your pleasure centers light up. But if somebody says something, now wait, on the other hand, let me say something positive about that other side of the issue. Our pain centers fire. And that's where, we want to slay the messenger. It goes back to the old thing of don't argue politics or religion with people. You don't change their mind about politics or religion. You change their mind about you. Well, somebody like Dr. Harrell is so wonderful at getting people, just let's look at yourself from a little different perspective relative to whatever it is we're talking about. Last time I saw Dr. Harrell, I told her this story. When COVID first started, my wife Mary, where's Mary? She's in here somewhere, who teaches me everything I know. She reads to me every morning. I'm such a dumbbell. I know like 5 things. I know a bunch about 5 things, and Mary knows a bunch about everything. So when COVID first started, Mary said, for our morning ritual, I'm going to read this book out loud to you. It's a book called White Supremacy in Me. And it's about unconscious bias toward people of color. And I grew up in this South Louisiana town that was 68% African-American and Cajun, Italian, all mixed in. And I'm the least biased person in the world. Well, you read a chapter, then you do a thought exercise. You read a chapter, do a thought exercise. After the 3rd chapter, I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was sitting on the front porch after one of our morning sessions. We live on Lake Norman, and I was looking out at the lake, and the phone rang. It was my brother Glenn, who lives in Baton Rouge. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm sitting here. I got a gun, a noose, a knife, and I'm looking at the lake. I'm trying to decide how to kill myself because I'm the most bigoted SOB in the history of the world, and I didn't know it because of all the unconscious biases." Well, as Dr. Harrell alluded, one of the places we tend to have bias that perhaps results in protection from that pain that comes from looking at ourselves differently, the kind of pain I was feeling as Mary and I were working through this book, is in reference to people of another cohort, if not another generation. How many people here, other than me, are 50 years old or younger? Now, y'all lying. You know, they say, well, 70 is the new 50, right? That's why I qualify. But John, 85 is still 85, buddy. I hate to tell you that. Seriously, who's 50 years? Do we have any people who are 50 years or younger in here? Okay, if y'all don't mind, let's just start out this way. I want to see, would you tell me 2 things that you admire about or envy about the older generation? Admire or envy about older people?
How they grew up without technology.
How they grew up without what?
Technology.
Oh, how they grew up without technology. Ah, interesting. Anything else? What do you admire about older people or envy about older people?
Their experience.
Their experience. Kind of the wisdom that comes with having had that accumulated experience. What are 2 things that frustrate you? Or if you could wave a magic wand, you think it would make the world a little bit better if only older people would what? This takes courage.
Driving.
I just read the highest incidence of pedestrian death is in Florida. Guess why, right? What else?
I'm sorry. Thank you for inviting me today.
You're welcome. This is a safe space. All right, older people. All the rest of us old farts. Give me a couple of things you admire about younger people. Just give me some shout outs.
Energy.
They have that energy. Oh God, if only we had that energy, right?
And their knees.
In what?
Their knees.
They're great what?
They're great looks.
They're great looks, right. What else?
Openness.
Openness. Openness to different ideas, right? Willingness to expand their horizons. What else? What do you admire about young people? Think about young people in your own family.
Courage.
Oh, you took it right out of my mouth. I look at my grandchildren. It takes courage to go out there when you're scared.
Flexibility.
And their flexibility. They keep changing and moving forward. That's a good start because I think that it's always a mixed bag. Now, this topic of what do we do about the generations kind of is captured in this. Let's talk about older to younger. Young people today love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love gossip in place of activity. Know who said that? Socrates in 400 BC. There's always been tension between the generations. Now, you could certainly understand this is a big topic. It's a big topic because in our world particularly, it's a big topic for us to consider. We have 5 cohorts at least. We have actually 6 or more cohorts. You can count little bitties in the workplace. And let me just say as a pause about God only knows what the youngest of our tribe are going to go through. Our daughter, Julia, had sinus surgery last week, and our precious little grandson, her son, Michael, who's 5, said to her tearfully, "Are you going to die?" And she said, "No, doctor's going to take good care of me." And he said, "No, I mean, is someone going to shoot you?" Now, my grandchildren are protected. They have never seen the nightly news. My daughter and son-in-law are like the safety patrol of not letting them get on the internet and unmonitored things. I don't know, but all the mass shootings, I mean, it's by osmosis. So people are concerned about different things is what I'm saying. This business about 5 generations also has dramatic implications in healthcare, leadership, in teamwork, and the workforce crisis we all know we have, which directly threatens our well-being in terms of whether or not we're going to get healthcare. How do we recruit and retain people from all 5 cohorts is what smart people are figuring out. Because guess what? There's not a warehouse of 20-something, 30-something-year-olds educated in fill in the blank, be it nursing or respiratory tech or whatever it is, that we can just go pick people out of. We got to find a way to be creative. Now, what we want to move beyond or attribution errors. We want to move beyond generational tensions where we're judging each other negatively. Other programs in Dr. Harrell's wonderfully orchestrated series have asked different, whether if your body looks different than somebody else's body in one way or another. We want to move beyond that. And the goal is to help us all recognize the distinct skills and talents and gifts that different cohorts bring. Any of you have heard me speak, and many of you heard me speak 100 times, because to our privilege, Mary and I have been invited to be a part of this community for more than 25 years. Let's use this food for thought to polish and broaden our notions of what we can do to be heroes as a community of people joining together in creating safe spaces for each other. Heroes are people who create safe spaces for other people. Number one, I think it's important for us to avoid barrier labels. This is the biggest bugaboo to well-being we humans have ever invented. The us, them, we, they ways of thinking that we're infinitely capable of concocting based on our differences in backgrounds, our differences in gender, our differences in experiences or life experiences. And today, more than ever, due to what we call the fundamental error of attribution that I alluded to already, where if someone thinks or behaves differently than my mental map suggests they should think or behave, because people like me are right, we slay their character. Rather than jumping to inquisitiveness, I'm sure your behavior or your attitude toward this makes sense. I'm just not understanding it because it's different than mine. That's the charitable attitude. That's the resilient attitude. That's the attitude upon which positive teamwork and positive collaboration, collegiality, positive community, positive love that lasts a lifetime is based upon that kind of attitude of inquisitiveness, as opposed to the judgmentalness that comes when you're thinking or behaving or voting or pulling for a team that's different than mine. So therefore, you must be dumb, stupid, bad, ignorant, fill in the blank, lazy. We do character assassination. What we need to do is avoid those barrier labels and not slay each other's character is the point. This is a two-sided coin. On the one hand, we've got to consider that there is usefulness to some ways of conceptualizing things because it creates a shorthand for us in trying to figure out, my punchline, how to be more generous and gracious. I don't want what we're going to say when we talk about generational cohorts to create shorthand for ways that we can judge the other generations, but rather shorthand for ways that we can better grasp and understand what are the barriers that I'm going to have to scale if I'm going to be able to graciously join, lovingly, charitably, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever adjectives call on your better angels. Conceptualizations will help us understand what are some challenges to that kind of grace, and also highlight some pitfalls to the kind of joining we want to do if we're going to better understand and embrace this new member of our family who is of a different age than me, or this new stage of our life, or this new person I'm trying to get along with. It's a two-sided coin. On the one side of the coin is the generational theory. The generational theory that says people resemble the times into which we are born for a lifetime far more profoundly than we resemble our own families. So people resemble the cohort into which they are born in, with whom they are raised, more so than they resemble their own families. That's the classic generational cohort theory that started all the discussion back about 30 years ago. And there are 5 generations. Now, that's a busy slide. And I was reminded recently, I was sitting in the audience and a guy put up this slide. And then, I swear, that's the slide. And he spoke about it for like 20 minutes. He was going through on line 16 right here, and I was totally like Mr. Magoo. Y'all remember Mr. Magoo from the cartoons? You can't see? So I'm going to take this and break it down for you. All right, so first we have some of the stereotypes. We've got the traditionalists, who are between 78 and 98 years of age, and that's some of us in here. And the stereotype that creates barrier labels is you're rigid, you're set in your ways, or in many ways, you won't retire. And you keep showing up and showing up and showing up. And sometimes rather than being welcome for all of your wisdom, you're looked at askance because it takes you a little longer to formulate and run through all that stuff in your computer and come up with a statement about your wisdom. Then we got the baby boomers, those of us who are 77 to 58. The stereotype is, look, you made your money and ruined the world while you're at it with all of your workaholism. And it's not cute that you don't know what TikTok is. Get over it. It's not cute to be mystified by technology in this day and time. Then we got Generation Xers, people who age 57 to 43. The stereotype there is they're only out for themselves. They don't care about the mission. They don't care about the vision. They don't care about the higher order deal that we're committed to here in this unit or this community or in this company. They're only out for themselves. The stereotype for Generation Ys or the millennials, ages 28 to 42, tends to they want to wear flip-flops to work. They show up late for their job interview and haven't prepared for it, but feel like they're entitled to it. The stereotype for ages 27, people born after 1996, is they're surgically attached to their iPhones, right? And you can be sitting at the table with them. If you want to communicate with them, you got to send them a text. Don't call them because they're insulted if you leave them a voicemail. It takes too much time. You got to text at minimum. Now, one point I'm making is let's not use barrier labels. And so I would say to you, all of us think in these ways, but let that way of thinking be a red flag that creates an uh-oh feeling. When I think that way about another human being, I ought to get the uh-oh feeling and say, wait a minute, I'm being a bigot. I'm being a generational bigot here. I am saying this person is just like every other person of that age. And come on, man. Surely you know that's not the case. Some of that stuff might be true sometimes. But is it true? Is all that stuff about that I just outlined true about every person you know who is that age? Of course it's not. So a second thing is, I think it's important to be curious and respectful and study your people, your colleagues, the members of your committee you're on, your neighborhood people, your own family. And in doing that studying, what happens is you find things to be appreciated. If I really get to know you, person age 78 to 98, I find out that, you're a member of an incredible cohort. You're a member of the group of people who changed the world in so many ways, leaders of civil rights and feminist movement. We tend to skip over that other part, but that's where Martin Luther King and Ruth Bader Ginsburg came from, that generation. Certainly Gloria Steinem. The baby boomers, we worked hard, became workaholic. We also were the first victims of income equality in our country and the stratification of incomes and the drastic changes in our economy. It might be interesting to find out what was it like for you being born in the 40s or 50s and how the world shifted and changed so much. Generation Xers, 43 to 57, they're the last analog generation. They're the last group that identifies themselves based on pop culture. You ask them, they know who the Brady Bunch was. There was like everybody watched Friends, or they're the last group that was unified by some of those pop and cultural experiences. The millennials, aged 28 to 42, were people who have been given the bad rap of it's been easy for you. They survived the Great Recession of recent times, scared them to death. They became people who graduate with a $200,000 or $600,000 education debt. And in Harvard Business Review, big stories about it's just part of the educational process. Now, you and your $400,000 education, you got to go work for free for 2 to 3 years in an unpaid apprenticeship if you want to get it, along with all the other MBAs who can't get jobs, if you're going to get a job. Be kind. Everybody you meet's fighting a hard battle is the punchline of this. Now, the Generation Zs, those younger ones that we're talking about, these are people who indeed have been attached to technology and screens and so forth. But let me just paint a little picture here. Social media is like the most poignant good news, bad news in my lifetime because of what it's doing, particularly to young people, with unrealistic notions on a minute-by-minute basis of what other people's glamorous lives are like, in the food they're eating today, in the clothes they're wearing. I got a niece two nieces, sisters, and one's a real truth teller, and she, the younger one told the older one, why you keep lying on your face or YouTube, whatever that thing is that she does. You know, your life is not that way. You're just showing the good parts. But that's what kids are looking at. And through that, it's not just cyberbullying, it's also negative social comparisons that are happening. And very interestingly, what we now know is because of how many hours are spent on screens, particularly if it's screens during the evening, there's a chronic sleep deprivation cohort that really correlates with the mental health challenges. Make no doubt about this. It's not just that we're better at diagnosing. It's not just that we're popularizing that how many people these days are calling attention to what high percentages of young people are depressed, are lonely, or doing self-harm or suicidal. It's more than ever young people are doing those things. And we think that one of the vital variables is sleep deprivation, which relates to too many hours on the screen. So the experts in this say, for God's sake, make sure your younger kids don't have access to the screen when they go in their bedrooms because they'll be up on the screen half the night. Furthermore, what happens with this younger group that sometimes we are skeptical about, they all think they deserve a trophy and have an easy time of it, is that it's a cohort that doesn't have a lot of hope. The world is a scary place. And it's not just my 5-year-old grandson noticing it. These young people are wondering, is this a place I could want to marry and have kids in? So we've got to move. I mean, my plea is that I stimulate your thinking, I hope, to look at how we are different and do it with some grace. Now, this is going to be kind of busy because I couldn't figure out how to split this one. We've got some real differences in educational experiences that compel us to, the younger prefer online kind of education, quick hit kinds of things. I wrote a book a couple years ago in an outfit from Austria said, would you be willing to break up the book into 2-minute multimedia educational lessons? And I said, hell no. It took me forever to write this stupid book. It's going to take the rest of my life to break it up into 2-minute multimedia snippets. Well, nobody's going to read the book. And they were right. Nobody's reading it, but I'm still proud of it. It's on my shelf. And I'm binge watching Netflix instead of spending another 3 years breaking it up into 2-minute multimedia kinds of things. We also have real differences in communication preferences, right? How many of you prefer to get a phone call? How many of you have written a letter lately? If you write a thank you note, do you write a physical thank you note or write an email thank you note? How many of you think I mean, it's very gracious to write a physical thank you note, but in the category of, I find myself sometimes writing an email thank you note because it's all or nothing. When I go find some stationery, sit down and write it, I wait so long, then I'm embarrassed. And so sometimes I send a quick one by email and say, my mama taught me better, but I'm gonna send you a real one later on, Mom would knock me over if she knew this was what I was doing. How many of you have changed the way you communicate with your kids, your grandkids? How many of you text your kids or grandkids? How many of you use text? Yeah, you see, it was really interesting. Maybe 15, 18 years ago, I wrote a book for a company called Medtronic, and we were saying we need to make it all online. It was for heart patients. And the people from Medtronic who make pacemakers and defibrillators said, the people who have those devices are all over 60. Only a small percentage of people over 60 have access to the internet. That was just 18 years ago. We all have access to the internet now. So it's just changed things. Now, the challenge we face in medicine is the deglorification of medicine, the paradox of medicine. It is still considered one of the most admired professions, but we just completed a survey, another national survey. We were wondering what the case was, and a smaller percentage of dentists and physicians would unequivocally recommend medicine to their offspring today than before, because it's so hard. It's such a hard. So is medicine a calling? Is it a job? Is it a place where I'm going to pass through for a while, or is it the resting place for the rest of my career? And then finally, I think to be considered is that people have different notions of business savvy. How many of you have young people in your family who are having difficulty being satisfied with what you think is a good job? And if they would stick with it, it would get to be a better job. So many people we talk with say, my nephew, my son, my whomever, got a good education, got a job as a fill in the blank, but because they're not making enough money fast enough or getting advanced as quickly as they think they should, or it's not as changing the world as they think the job should be. He's gone through 4 or 5 different jobs in search of a level of fulfillment that seems to be unattainable. Y'all think that's a new phenomenon? How many of you changed jobs multiple times as young people, you older folks? Did you? How many of you kind of changed jobs or career courses fewer than 3 times in the course of your career? It just, if we take 100,000 people, is a far more frequent event in the younger people than it ever approximated being for those of us who are older. One of my nieces told her dad recently, there's a cohort of cousins that I have, we're first cousins, and my 4 siblings, we all grew up as siblings. We all had one job, one. We all either went to work for a company, kept it, or 2 maybe. Like I was on the faculty of medical school, but then I went into practice and I stayed in practice. Mary and I created our practice. And one of my first cousins, like a brother's daughter, who has an MBA and is a CPA, said to my cousin David, "It was easy for you. You had no choice. You knew you had to work hard. Because of the way you raised me, I don't know I have to work hard. So she works hard, but she keeps changing the work she does. So, because she wants more fulfillment." And we were less focused on fulfillment as being the determining factor, like fulfillment as in, is this fun this day or this week or this season, than younger people. And then finally, there's the concern about lifestyle. Do you think that people are more or the same or less concerned today about this thing we call work-life balance? Yeah, and we're chasing a ghost. I mean, this is one of the things that Mary and I say, We spent the first 40 years of our career helping create a couple of concepts. We're going to spend the rest of our career trying to help correct, because the attempted solution to the problem perpetuated a problem. Those of us came of age in the 60s and early 70s invented the notion of the mythical balanced life. And here's the news flash: nobody's got a balanced life. And until when we first reviewed the literature on this for medical professionals, only about 15% said they had work-family distress. They didn't. They just worked. Now, I'm not saying that was right, but they weren't feeling guilty about it. They didn't go to all their kids' ball games and coach the teams, and they didn't feel guilty about it. They made a game here or there. Starting in the 80s, and progressively in increasing percentages, the number one distress factor for medical professionals is work-family imbalance. The work hasn't lessened, the guilt has increased. Now, is that good? Maybe so. Maybe it creates a correction factor, but it sure is painful. Now, what do you think the number one kind of common denominator influencer that has changed the lives of every cohort, no matter how old you are, has been in your lifetime?
Technology.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I'm not just talking about the internet. I'm talking about the washing machine. Mary and I were just talking about this. What an atrocity it was in her family that her great-grandfather, who was this tough old Alabama guy, would never give in and buy a washing machine for her grandmother or a stove, a gas stove. And so the technology, from television to God knows, the internet and so forth, has created a real different expectation and set of lifestyle issues for us in terms of comfort. The current Surgeon General, his mission is to address loneliness in America. Measured levels of loneliness have never been higher in the history of mental health. There's a way to measure loneliness. Starting in late childhood through the end of life, loneliness has never been higher. And loneliness is on par with smoking 15 cigarettes a day as a risk factor for chronic disease. So it's one of the vital variables. Technology has increased the age of individualism and resulted in a diminishment of community. Now, bear this in mind. So we're talking about younger people who grow up with this, and they grow up with the influence of this, and then we put them into a job and expect them to be great team players. And unless they've had some corrective developmental experiences along the way, like team sports or military or things that taught them teamwork, they don't learn it watching a screen. And so I'm not being judgmental. I'm saying we've got some developmental challenges. If we're going to recruit, then we're going to train in order to retain. We've got to do this. It's also true that technology has created in some slow life strategy. People are taking longer to grow up, as evident in launch, as evidenced by younger people are less independent. They're slower to get their driver's license. They marry later in life, if at all. Now, you could say, why would they want to leave this house where they got their own bedroom and their own bathroom to go live in a lousy apartment with some knuckleheads in, the mess that comes there? And it's true. It's also true technology, if we think about medical technology, has resulted in slower aging. Joking aside, 15 biological markers have shown that we are indeed 5 to 7 years younger, no matter what our age. If you're beyond 65, you're 5 to 7 years younger than were people that chronological age 30 years ago. So, John, there's some hope for you. There's some hope. Martha, I'm sorry, but you're going to be around a while, probably. That's my friends, John and Mark. So, one of the things that we've got to consider as we are being respectful is what's important to each cohort. And again, I don't know the answers to these things. I offer this as food for thought, and then we can have some discussion. You got to match before you can engage. You got to match a person's perspective before you can lead them, before you can get along with them. And if you're dealing with a person who is older, 78 and beyond, let's say, what's really important is to show respect for their wisdom. You know, I'm thinking about it in the way I'm thinking about it, but you've been around a long time. Help me understand, what might I be missing? What a great, great phrase. If you're talking with someone 58 to 77, baby boomers, what's important to us is, and particularly those of you who are younger who are leading in healthcare, it's important, you don't have to have a parade for us, but it's nice to acknowledge the contributions they made. What happens as we get beyond midlife is the Greek chorus, we're planning to get smaller and smaller. And I was thinking about myself in this regard. So I've been on this career mission for a long time, studying well-being and burnout and so forth in medical professionals. And it was important to me to go speak at this conference, that conference, wherever, and get this applause and that applause. I say with vanity, it's true, as I look back on it. Well, these days I'm kind of bemused by something I used to be kind of outraged by. People will sometimes sweetly send me an article saying, this is something you might be interested in. And they don't even notice I wrote the article. You know, and I say, and I mean that sincerely, it's that it used to, I was like, for God's sake, I'm not getting my due. And now it's like, you know, this is the way life is. If you do good work, the world moves on, and nobody remembers who invented the Xerox machine. You know, we just know we make copies now or something. And so a lot of this stuff that we're doing is like public health campaigns. It does matter that even though the Greek chorus is very small, it matters that Mary or that a handful of people I know say to me, you know, you're one of the first people that started talking about that. It never stops mattering. We do have our vanities, and that doesn't mean we're knuckleheads. If you're dealing with a person of a certain age, they don't want to be treated as though you're the first person who had a creative idea. They want to be respected as a person who's had some good ideas and done some good stuff too. And those of us in that age range, a title tends to matter. Even if you invent a new position to give them a title, you don't have to make them president of the world. But if you want to motivate a seasoned person as we're repopulating the medical workplace, that matters. For Generation Xers, 43 to 57 years of age, you know what matters. Financial stability matters. Work-life flexibility matters. That's the age when people are having kids or they're trying to square the unholy bargain that they made with their life made in themselves. If you will just hold off until I get educated and get established, missing all of our birthdays and all of our play days and all of our date nights, then once I get established, the payoff will come. You got to facilitate through work flexibility some of that. The millennials, 28 to 42, very interestingly, want to be part of something bigger. In medicine, I saw a study published in the Journal of Medical Association last year. The new cohort of doctors, young doctors, it wasn't just fresh out of medical school, when asked what are the criteria for whether you're going to accept a job, one of the things they mentioned was whether or not the hospital was environmentally friendly. Hospitals are in the top 3 emitters of toxic stuff into the atmosphere, into the environment, because of all the various technology we have. This is an example of young people, now whether or not they were turned down a big paying job for a pollutant hospital, the study didn't follow those people. How about if I give you enough money, do you care whether or not we're doing emissions? But as a cohort of people, there's a mentality of, I want to believe in what you're doing. I want to believe in the goodness of what you're doing. And they want frequent feedback, not the year-end review. They want to be caught doing things right or given corrective feedback tactfully in an ongoing way. Remember, this is the cohort that started being on the internet and you're getting a lot of interactivity. Then finally, Gen Zers like excitement. They also claim that they want long-term security because the world has been a scary place for them. Is this place going to be around? They want a constant learning environment, and they want it now. I was just reading a Harvard Business Review article where consultants about career advancement said, yeah, is it reasonable to expect a promotion after only working 2 years? How many of you would say it's reasonable? I don't think it's reasonable. You think it's reasonable after 2 years? Does anybody agree with that? Y'all do. Y'all young people, y'all don't know what the hell y'all talking about. We worked in the coal mines until the sun stopped shining. No, but young people, what bemused me about this article I read was young people were always saying they want a promotion within 2 years so they're going to get another job. And then they interviewed a bunch of career experts. And the career, who all said, yes, it's reasonable. But the career experts, one was 34 years old, one was 37. So, you haven't been around long enough to be expert in anything. But I don't mean it cynically. But there are a lot of different ways we can promote. We can promote learning, we can promote excitement. This is an interesting aside talking about generations. So my birthday is in February 3rd. Forever, the Barnum and Bailey Circus has come through North Carolina, used to come through North Carolina the week of February 3rd. And so it was a sweet little thing that our daughters, Rebecca and Julia, who are now 40, I don't know how old they are, 40, they look like they're 10 and 12 to me, but they're 45 and 42 or something like that. Well, I would take them to the circus. Mary never wanted to go to the circus. It made her nervous. But it would be a father-daughter thing, so we'd go to the circus in Greensboro. We lived in Winston-Salem at the time. And we did that even they both went to school in Chapel Hill. Even when they were in Chapel Hill, they would meet me at the circus. It was very sweet. Touched my heart. They'd meet me at the circus on my birthday, or the weekend. Well, then we continued that tradition, and then until our granddaughter Macy was about 4 or 5 years old. She's now 13. But then the circus stopped. And the commentary was PETA objections to animal cruelty, the astronomical costs of transporting the 3-ring circus. It actually had become a 1-ring circus. It was less and less magnificent. But here was the main thing the guy who ran the circus said: we can't compete for the excitement factor. You know, these people grew up doing stuff online, games, where some action happens, some event happens every 3 to 7 seconds. They don't want to watch a trapeze act that takes 6 minutes. The circus is coming back to town, actually, without any animals. I just spent $9,000 on tickets to go, so it's not that high. But I'm making everybody in my family, because it's on my birthday, actually. So those are the cohorts. That's on the one hand, the generational cohorts. We're different. We're different. But I remember I said it's a two-sided coin. And on the other hand, I think it's important for us to remember, you know, the older we get, the less certain we are about anything. Because wisdom kicks in and we realize it's always multifactorial. Yeah, this is true, and something else is true that contradicts this. I love my children and my grandchildren with my life. I chew my arms off for them. That's one variable. Another variable, they drive me insane sometimes. I need to lock myself in a room to get away. That doesn't mean I don't love them. Just both those variables are true. Any psychosocial phenomenon is multifactorial. I miss both my parents. I loved and liked both of them a tremendous amount. They both died over the last 7 years. And what's also true is when I miss them, I'm kind of glad I don't want them to have died, but I'm glad they're not suffering anymore the way they were suffering in the latter years. Both those things are true. Well, the same is true about this generational cohort. I never met a generation. I've only met people. And this is my ultimate punchline here. I think that I'm not alone here. There's a growing literature refuting the generational cohort notion. I mean, after all, look at the cohorts range are 15 to 18 years. What are the odds that someone born the beginning of that is going to be the same as the one born 15 years later. Don't make Cajun logic mistakes. Many of you know I grew up in South Louisiana, and I was imbued with Cajun logic. Cajuns get the right concept, wrong application of things, and ignore the obvious. Now, I was thinking about this recently in light of Roe v. Wade and the new news in our state. My cousin Bonadonna's grandson is the first person in Bonadonna's line of the family to be smart enough to get into college. And so he's got a great-grandson who's going to LSU. But he's continuing the Bonadonna tradition of right concept, wrong application. Recently, he was taking an American history course just last week, the teacher said, so who can tell me what Roe v. Wade is all about? He raised his hands, yeah, little Bonadonna, can you tell? Yeah, that's the only decision George Washington had to make before he crossed that Delaware. They're going to row or they're going to wade. So beware Cajun logic. Now here's the Cajun logic. We've had a lot of examples of Cajun logic in my field. The mythical balanced life, Cajun logic. Nobody's got a balanced life. It's about alternating. Stress is dangerous. That was Cajun logic. It was the right concept, but the wrong application. Stress is not dangerous. Strain is dangerous. You can get stressed and calm down, stressed and calm down, stressed. The healthiest people who are the happiest, who live the longest, have a tremendous amount of stress in their lives, but they don't go numb and keep going and just stay strained. The notion that men and women are so, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Y'all remember that book? I wish I had written that book and made $1 gazillion, but it's absolute trash when it comes to the science. Men and women are way more similar than we are different on almost every variable that has been investigated, if you investigate a large enough number of people. Now, we all know cute anecdotes about left brain, right brain, about, he doesn't talk about emotions and she wants to talk. But the science of it is the notion that you got to intimidate people in order to motivate them. You scare them into conformity, but then you demoralize them and demotivate them. We've had a lot of examples of Cajun logic, including focus on what you do wrong, and then you get a lot better, as opposed to doing strength-based recognition of what you do right and positioning you to do more of that, then you get magnificent. Well, here's the point. No matter who we study, including the generations, if you study a large enough cohort, what you find is that people are far, far more similar than we are. We have far more similarities than we have differences. And this is the refutation of the generational cohort. And the science is robust. Yes, some of the anecdotes apply. Yes, some of the stereotypes apply sometimes. But if you study enough people, traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, if you study enough people, what you're going to find is that people are very, very similar. For example, this is again from a recent Harvard Business Review article excerpted from a book. But the point being, the 35-year-old manager today is no different than the 35-year-old managers of yesteryear in the ways that they approach things. And the point is, don't dwell on our differences and turn it into barrier labels. People like you all tend to do, or people like them all tend to do. What we know is that we all have shared concerns about safety, stress, about acknowledgement. And if we find the common space, the psychology of attraction, now this is a great concept. The psychology of attraction is, once I learn something about you that's appealing to me, meaning is like me, because we are attracted to things like us, we start shrinking the space. In one relationship at a time, we bridge the us, them, we, they ways of thinking, the bigotry we tend to engage in. Where there's this wonderful family drama called This Is Us. It has got a chronically, enormously obese young woman in it who's in her 20s. But as you look at it, you realize, the heartbreak she's been through and the excitement she has and the sweetness she is, and she becomes a person to you. You know, and it's a multiracial family, and you learn with that African American, you become a person to you. It's the psychology of attraction. It's a profoundly important program that we've been binge watching lately. So one of the things that we've got to do is bridge the gap. Not engage in barrier labels, secondly. We've also got to think like anthropologists. Don't assume you know, ask. What's this person's lifestyle needs? What is important to them? And, you know, move beyond the obvious. Early on, yeah, they've got kids. Well, not everybody's 30 or 40 has kids, but they still want some of the same stuff. Toward the end of the career, I want to be able to finish with grace. And I want to be able to finish with acknowledgement. I want to be able to look back on what I contributed and say grace over it and have people appreciate me. We all have some shared underlying wants about having a voice, being respected enough to be asked opinions of, be treated fairly. It's not magic, but it's atrocious when we fail to do that because they look a certain way or because they have hair a certain color. My same grandson asked me day before yesterday, what did you have to do to make your hair that color? I said, your Nana poured some Clorox in my hair when I was sleeping. What we've also got to do, if we're smart, is we'll build collaborative relationships. This is part of the beauty that happens in families, incidentally. If you have a multi-generational family, you get young people and old people working together. In the workplace, the military has a great model for this of having younger people manage older people with respect. They make the older person your partner and involve them in what you do. Or older people managing younger people, discussing and engaging rather than command and control. You know, I want to know your opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean your opinion is going to lead what we do. I was working in a hospital recently. They redid the intensive care unit, and it skyrocketed the morale because the nurses said they cared enough to come around the architects and ask our opinions. We're the ones that practice here 12 hours a day. Now, they didn't follow every nurse's recommendation. They didn't get to have all the votes, but they respected us enough. You respected me enough to have the conversation. That's a great guideline. Hold yourself accountable to that. Number 5 is to create cross-generational mentoring. What we know is that research has shown that you learn a lot more from each other than you do from formal training. That's where the most valuable lessons in any workplace come from. So younger teaching older about internet stuff, or older sharing some of their institutional knowledge, or mixed age work teams. 2 more. I would say be a generational agnostic, as it's called. You know, I don't believe in those stereotypes any more than I believe in racial stereotypes. I'm telling you something about myself. I truly don't. Pick a person, get to know them. Now, pick another person, get to know them. And then do it over and over and over again. And finally, I love this concept, practice generational humility. How dare you be judgmental? How dare I be judgmental? The older we get, the less certain we are about anything because we move from hubris to humility. We learned this in marital research. Beyond about 35 years, which tends to correlate with people being in their late 50s, early 60s, people become happier. And it's not because things change dramatically in their marriages. They move from the hubris of young age, I know I'm right and you're wrong, and so we're going to battle it out about whatever our issues are, to the humility in the wisdom that comes once you get grown up and realize we're different. We always were different. We always will be different, but I still choose you. And I choose to get along with you. A physician recently sent me an email. He said, that just smacked me, gobsmacked me, that hubris to humility. He said, I was brushing my teeth this morning and I was thinking, I have complained about everybody I've worked with for the last 35 years. I've complained every day of our 30-year marriage to my wife about my wife. I was brushing my teeth this morning and I realized I ain't such a piece of cake myself. Maybe I need to start thanking some people. Final slide. I love generational humility notions. This is from C.S. Lewis about humility. We will know the humble man not because he hangs his head thinking about how humble he is. In fact, he won't be thinking about himself at all. We'll know the humble man because he'll ask about others with joyful curiosity. That's my wish for all of us, that we'll have joyful curiosity about each other. So thank y'all for letting me be with you. It's been a privilege.